Welcome, brave soul, I am the forgotten storyteller. Before we begin, tap that like button if you dare, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're listening from. And if you make it to the end of this video, I hope to see you in the next story. I hope you're ready, because I am. Let's begin. The first thing anyone noticed about Kerry Holloway was her hands, delicate, graceful, steady as marble, and yet, there was something about them that made you imagine what they'd look like wrapped around your throat. Our story today begins in the rain-washed village of Hallowford, a place that should have been peaceful. The kind of town where front doors were still left unlocked and the loudest noise at night was the ticking of an old grandfather clock. But beneath the soft, polite veneer, something rotten had been growing, and the first signs of it came from the most unexpected source: a woman who had built her life on trust. Kerry Holloway was 38 years old, a senior care assistant who had worked in the village for more than a decade. She was the sort of person you'd hand your house keys to without hesitation. Her hair was always neatly tied back, her uniform spotless, her voice so calm and reassuring that even the most anxious patients would let her take their pulse without a flicker of doubt. She seemed like the kind of person you could rely on during your weakest, most fragile moments. But Hallowford had been suffering a quiet plague. Over the last 6 months, the elderly population had thinned at an unnatural rate. Old friends disappeared from the cafe, neighbors failed to come home from the hospital. And yet, the deaths were always explained away: heart failure, complications, infections that just happen at that age. Nobody wanted to suspect foul play. No one wanted to believe that the warm, smiling Kerry might be the thread connecting them all. No one, that is, except Clara Dalrymple. Clara had grown up in Hallowford, the daughter of Arthur and Margaret Dalrymple, an elderly couple with a long history in the village. Her father had been a postman, her mother a school librarian. They lived quietly now in a small brick house at the end of Willow Lane. When her parents' health began to decline, Clara felt relief knowing that Kerry would be looking after them. But relief had soured into unease almost immediately. She noticed it first in her mother's speech: slurred words, unusual pauses. Her father, once sharp and talkative, now drifted off mid-sentence, eyes glassy, as though sleep were dragging him under even in the middle of the day. At first, Clara blamed the medications, the aging process, the natural decline that no one could stop. But then she began to notice something else. These changes happened after Kerry's visits. The pattern was small but undeniable. The idea lodged in Clara's brain like a splinter. What if Kerry was doing something to them? But suspicion was not enough. Hallowford was a place where rumors died before they could even be whispered, and Kerry was loved by all. Clara knew that if she accused her outright, the backlash would be brutal. She needed proof. So she did something she never thought she'd have to do. One rainy evening, while her parents slept in their recliners, Clara moved silently through the living room, placing tiny black devices in the corners, hidden cameras. She placed one in the kitchen near the tea station, another in the living room aimed at the medicine cabinet, and one more in the hallway. Her hands shook as she worked, and more than once she thought she heard footsteps outside. But by the time she left, the cameras were in place, quietly waiting to record whatever happened when she wasn't there. Days passed. The first recordings were mundane: Kerry making tea, chatting, adjusting pillows, smiling warmly at her patients. Clara began to doubt herself. Maybe she had imagined it all. Maybe stress was twisting her perceptions. Then came Thursday. It was late evening when Clara sat down with her laptop to review the day's footage. She was tired, barely paying attention at first, until she saw Kerry's figure in the grainy kitchen feed. Kerry moved differently that day, slower, more deliberate. She checked the hallway, then opened the medicine cabinet. Her fingers skimmed the bottles, selecting one and shaking out pills, far more than the prescribed dose. She crushed them with the back of a spoon and stirred the powder into 2 mugs of tea. Her face, caught in a sliver of light from the window, was expressionless. Not cold, not angry, just empty, as if she were doing nothing more sinister than adding sugar. Clara felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. She kept watching, her nails digging into her palms. Kerry carried the tea into the living room, smiling, speaking softly to her parents. She handed the mugs to them with a kind of tender patience, watching intently as they drank. But it was the second clip that broke something inside Clara. Kerry knelt beside her mother's chair, stroking her hair in slow, rhythmic motions. Her lips moved, whispering something the camera's microphone barely caught. Clara boosted the volume, leaned in close, and felt a chill creep up her spine. "It's better this way," Kerry murmured. It was then, as Clara replayed the footage, that she noticed something strange, something she couldn't explain. In the reflection of the kitchen window, for just a heartbeat, Kerry's face didn't look like Kerry at all. It was longer, stretched unnaturally, the eyes black and depthless. It was gone in a blink, but Clara swore she saw it. And suddenly she remembered something. A story her mother had told her as a child, about a woman named Mary Black, a midwife in Hallowford nearly 2 centuries ago, accused of hastening the deaths of her patients. The legend claimed Mary had been burned as a witch in the marshes outside town, cursing the village with her dying breath. "I'll guide the weak to the other side," the tale went, "until my work is done." Clara's blood ran cold. The legend of Mary Black had always been just that, a fireside story told on stormy nights, the kind of thing children repeated at sleepovers to scare each other. Clara had never believed it. But now, staring at Kerry's distorted reflection in the grainy footage, she wasn't so sure. She didn't sleep that night. The rain that lashed against her window seemed louder, more insistent, as though the weather itself was trying to keep her awake. Her thoughts spun between fear and disbelief. Could Kerry really be connected to this curse? More disturbing still, did she even know it herself? By morning, Clara had made her decision. She took the footage straight to the police. At first they were polite but dismissive. The local sergeant, a tired man with deep lines etched into his face, replayed the footage with a sigh. "Looks bad, I'll admit," he said, "but it's not enough for a conviction." She could claim it was an accident, wrong dosage, a mix-up. Clara slammed her palm on the desk. "She's killing them. I saw her and I heard her." She said, "It's better this way." The sergeant glanced at her, his expression softening. "We'll look into it." But his tone told her they wouldn't move quickly enough. The following days blurred into a haze of tension. Clara visited her parents daily, refusing to let Kerry be alone with them. Kerry noticed. Her warm demeanor cooled into polite detachment. She stopped making small talk. She moved through the house like a shadow, her eyes always flicking toward Clara with an unreadable glint. One night, Clara woke to a sound that made her heart seize, a slow, deliberate tapping at her bedroom window. She lived on the 2nd floor. She crept to the curtain, every muscle in her body tight. When she pulled it back, the street below was empty. But in the glass, she saw it again, the warped, stretched face from the footage, hovering behind her own reflection. The mouth moved, but no sound came. Then just as suddenly, it was gone. Clara stopped sleeping altogether. She began digging into the legend of Mary Black, searching through local archives and old church records. The more she found, the worse the story became. Mary had been accused of not only killing patients but of feeding on their deaths, drawing something from them at the moment of passing. Witnesses swore her shadow sometimes moved on its own. When they burned her, the smoke had formed a human shape that drifted toward the village before dispersing. The chilling part was a single detail in one of the oldest accounts. Her eyes were black as tar and her hands were gentle. That weekend, Clara returned to her parents' home to find the air unnaturally still. The curtains were drawn. The front door was unlocked. Her heart hammered as she stepped inside. Kerry was in the living room, kneeling between her parents' chairs, holding both their hands. Her eyes lifted to meet Clara's, and for the first time, the warmth was gone completely. Her voice was soft, almost mournful. "They're tired, Clara. They've had enough." Clara lunged forward, shoving Kerry back. Her parents were breathing, but sluggishly. On the coffee table sat 2 cups of tea, the surface shimmering faintly. "You're not taking them," Clara hissed, grabbing the cups and dumping them into the sink. Kerry didn't fight back. She just stood there, tilting her head slightly, as if studying Clara like one might study an insect. "Some people," Kerry murmured, "don't understand the gift they're being given." Clara called the police again. This time they arrived quickly, thanks to her frantic tone. They took statements, examined the cups, and escorted Kerry away. Clara thought it was over. It wasn't. 2 nights later, Clara's phone rang at 3:17 a.m. It was the police station. Kerry had been found dead in her holding cell. No cause yet, just that she was lying on the floor, eyes wide open, a faint smile on her lips. Clara felt no relief. In fact, a gnawing dread began to bloom in her chest. That night, she dreamed she was standing in the marshes outside Hallowford, the ground soft beneath her feet. A figure was moving toward her through the mist, a woman in a black dress, her skin pale as milk, her eyes as black as tar. She reached out a hand, and Clara saw that the fingers were Kerry's. When she woke, her bedroom smelled faintly of peat and rot. Over the next week, strange things began happening at her parents' house. Medicine bottles moved from their usual places. The tea kettle would whistle at odd hours. Her mother swore she saw that nice Kerry sitting in the armchair by the window, smiling faintly. Her father, increasingly confused, claimed someone sang to him at night. Clara set up the cameras again, praying she'd see nothing. But what she captured made her blood freeze. At 2:46 a.m., the living room camera flickered. A shadow appeared in the corner, tall, thin, impossible to place. It moved toward her parents' chairs. For a moment, the shadow bent down, and there, in the dim light, was Kerry's face, except not quite. The skin was too pale, the mouth too wide, the eyes a pit of blackness. She whispered something into her father's ear. His lips moved in reply, but the microphone didn't catch the words. Then, as quickly as it came, the shadow was gone. Clara didn't know whether to show the footage to the police or burn the cameras entirely. She began sleeping in her parents' house, keeping the lights on all night. But the sense of being watched never left. Sometimes, when she turned her head quickly, she'd catch a glimpse of someone standing in the hall mirror. Someone who wasn't there when she turned back. And always she seen the hands. Gentle and pale hands. One evening, as a storm rolled over Hallowford, Clara found herself alone in the kitchen. Her parents were asleep in their chairs. The wind rattled the windows. She turned to make tea and froze. There, on the counter, sat 2 cups already filled. Steam curled from the surface. And beside them stood Kerry, only now Clara could see through her. The shape wavered like heat rising from asphalt. Her smile was softer than ever. "They're tired, Clara," Kerry said again. "And so are you." Before Clara could scream, the lights went out. The kitchen was swallowed in darkness, save for the pale blue flash of lightning spilling through the rain-streaked window. Clara's breath came fast, sharp in the sudden silence. Kerry's translucent figure stood utterly still, her head tilted slightly, as though listening to some distant, invisible voice. The air was wrong, thicker, colder, pressing in against Clara's skin. She backed toward the doorway, every instinct screaming to run, but Kerry stepped forward, her bare feet making no sound against the tiles. "You think you've stopped me," she whispered. Her voice was layered now. One tone was hers, but underneath, something deeper vibrated, older and inhuman. "I'm just the hand that serves her. The hand that touches gently before she takes them." Lightning flared again, and in that heartbeat of light, Clara saw another figure standing behind Kerry. Taller, shrouded in black, with a face that was little more than an oval of shadow. But the eyes, those eyes burned like hot coals, and the sight of them rooted Clara to the spot. Mary Black. The storm roared outside, wind clawing at the roof, rain slamming against the walls. The smell of peat and decay thickened in the room until Clara gagged. Kerry moved closer still, her outline blurring, her features shifting. Sometimes her own face, sometimes the long, angular visage from the camera footage. "You can't keep them from her," Kerry said, her words soft, coaxing. "It's mercy. She eases the weight. She makes the pain stop." Clara's voice trembled. "They're not yours to take." "They belong to her," Kerry replied, her eyes flicking toward the shadow behind her. "And when their time comes, so will you." The house groaned as another wave of wind hit it. Somewhere upstairs, a door slammed shut on its own. Clara's fight-or-flight response kicked in hard. She lunged for the hallway, her hand fumbling for the torch she'd left on the side table. She snapped it on, the beam slicing through the gloom. Kerry's form recoiled, her edges fraying like smoke in wind. Clara didn't wait. She sprinted to the living room where her parents were sleeping. She shook them, calling their names, but they were sluggish, murmuring incoherently. On the table beside them sat their evening tea, still steaming. Her stomach lurched. "No," she whispered, swiping the cups to the floor where they shattered, the liquid spreading like ink over the carpet. A sound rose behind her, not footsteps, but a wet, dragging shuffle. She spun around to see Kerry stepping into the room, her eyes now bottomless pits of black. Mary's shadow loomed behind her, so tall it bent against the ceiling. The air grew freezing, and the torch in Clara's hand flickered violently. "They're already hers," Kerry murmured. "And you'll see, it's better this way." Clara's father coughed violently, his body jerking. Her mother let out a low moan. Clara's panic shifted into something sharper, defiance. She grabbed the crucifix from the wall, gripping it hard enough for the edges to bite into her palm. "I don't care what you are," she hissed. "You're not taking them." For the first time, Kerry's face twisted, not in anger but in something that almost looked like fear. Mary's shadow flickered, then leaned forward, and an icy wind rushed through the room, snuffing out every light. The darkness that followed was complete. Clara stumbled backward, feeling her way toward her parents. Her fingers brushed her father's shoulder, still warm, still breathing, but then another hand closed around her wrist. Not her father's. It was Kerry's. Her grip was cold, almost gentle, but it carried a strength that pinned Clara in place. "Don't fight her," Kerry whispered right in her ear. "She's waited long enough." Clara's pulse thundered. Somewhere inside that black void she sensed movement, Mary circling, closing in. Clara thought of the marshes, of the villagers who'd watched her burn, and realized with sick certainty that Mary's curse had never been about revenge against the living. It was about ownership. And Kerry. Kerry was just her vessel. A sudden crack split the air, thunder directly overhead. For a heartbeat, the flash illuminated the room and Clara acted. She wrenched herself free, grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace and swung blindly toward Kerry. The poker passed through her form like smoke, but Kerry let out a sound that made Clara's skin crawl, half scream, half laugh. "You think you can hurt me?" she hissed, her voice stretching unnaturally. "No," Clara said through clenched teeth. "But I can fucking end you." She turned and lunged for the kitchen, fumbling through the drawers until she found what she needed, a box of matches. The smell of gas filled the air almost instantly as she twisted the old stove's knobs. She struck a match, its tiny flame quivering in the draft. Kerry appeared in the doorway, her face now almost entirely Mary's, gaunt, predatory, those black eyes boring into Clara. "You'll burn your own house down?" Kerry asked, her tone more curious than mocking. "If it takes you with it," Clara replied. The match hissed into flame and Clara tossed it toward the stove. The fire erupted with a roar, the sudden light blinding. Kerry screamed, an inhuman echoing sound, as her form distorted violently, flickering between herself and the shadow of Mary Black. The taller figure shrieked, folding inward on itself like a collapsing wave. The heat surged, the walls groaning as flames licked up toward the ceiling. Clara grabbed her parents, dragging them toward the front door. Kerry's voice followed her, fractured and distant. "This isn't over. I'll guide you when your time comes." Outside, the rain soaked them instantly, steam hissing from their clothes as the fire devoured the house. Neighbors emerged from their homes, shouting, calling for help. Clara held her parents close, watching as the flames lit the night sky. And then, just for a moment, she saw it, in the upper window of the burning house. A figure, perfectly still, watching her through the fire. Pale hands rested on the glass. The face was Mary's, and she was smiling. In the weeks that followed, Clara's parents made a slow recovery. The police ruled the fire an accident, with Kerry's death in custody chalked up to natural causes. No one spoke of Mary Black, and most villagers treated the events as an unfortunate tragedy best left unexamined. But Clara knew better. Sometimes in the dead of night, she'd wake to the faint sound of tapping at her window. And in the glass, just behind her reflection, she'd catch a glimpse of pale hands just waiting. Let us know in the comments what you would have done if you were Clara.
Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts? Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare.